Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Artillery. It seems as if the dust has settled a bit since the National Endowment for the Arts began sending out emails that announced the rescinding of funds to many of our beloved arts institutions. And although there have been threats to dissolve this grant-giving body before, the fate of the NEA is still up in the air, but it feels different this time somehow, especially with all the efforts of this administration to quote-unquote get rid of government corruption. Well, bon chance with all that. This is a Green Room episode, one that focuses more on current events in the arts with a peppering of talk about specific artists and projects. Last month, I spoke with two artists who have been directly affected by these takebacks, and one artist who brought us some data analyzing the whole debacle. You'll hear from composer Rob Deemer, the man who researched it all, artistic director of the DC-based opera company INseries, Timothy Nelson, and Portland-based composer Darrell Grant. And after Darrell's interview, you'll hear a little bit from his opera Sanctuaries, an opera about the gentrification issues in Portland, Oregon. Rob Deemer was the recipient of the 2018 ASCAP Deems Taylor Virgil Thompson Internet Award. He is a composer, conductor, educator, author, and advocate. His work advocating for composers from underrepresented demographic groups led him to create the Institute for Composer Diversity at the State University of New York at Fredonia. His work with the Institute for Composer Diversity has culminated in partnerships with the League of American Orchestras, the National Association for Music Education, the College Band Directors National Association, the American String Teachers Association, and the Midwest Clinic. Deemer is professor and head of composition, as well as the chair of the Department of Theater and Dance at the State University of New York at Fredonia, and serves as the chair of the New York State School Music Association Composition and Songwriting Committee. Thanks for being on the show, Rob. Should I call you Dr. Deemer?
No, please. Okay. Rob's fine.
All right. You've been doing a lot of work with this whole NEA take backsies stuff, and I was kind of scrolling through Facebook and was really impressed by some of the data work that you've been working on. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you found out?
Sure. So just to give you a bit of a background of why I fell down this rabbit hole, what was it, only about 10 days ago or so. Mm-hmm. I was talking with a colleague of mine that I work with the Institute for Composer Diversity, and we were both like, what can we do to maybe help the organizations? Because of course, this was just a couple of days after some of the cuts had been announced. And so we had no idea about the scope of the thing. And so I'm like, well, the first thing I'd like to do is actually find if there's a list out there. And it didn't take me long to figure out that there was no list. Even right. People in the NEA had no list, at least from what I could tell. And so over the last 10 days or so, I've basically I downloaded 3 years of data from NEA and been checking them off as I've been able to find, because there are other organizations, there's other projects. There's one by the director, Annie Dorson, who kind of crowdsourced. She opened up a spreadsheet and said, hey, if your organization had a grant that was cut, put it in there. So I grabbed those, but I also was going through social media and articles and had folks reach out to me. So for whatever, I don't know why this little project seems to be one of the more comprehensive, but at least we've been able to find a whole lot of bad stuff. I mean, it's looking at, it's weird for many reasons, in part just because there's no rhyme nor reason why one group gets cut and another one doesn't. I've been looking through it, can't figure it out. This symphony gets cut, that symphony doesn't. This theater group gets cut, the other one, someone else who might even have something that on the face of it might even be more in the crosshairs because of the nature of the organization. For whatever reason, I haven't been able to find it. Now, that being said, all of the ones that, all of the groups that haven't been mentioned simply could be because either they didn't get an email, and I know there are some that are out there, but also some may have gotten the email, but then haven't let anybody know yet, at least
Right.
publicly.
Who does this seem to be impacting the most? I mean, this podcast is about all parts of the arts, not just music, and it seems like it's coming from sort of all sects of the arts world.
Yeah, and it's interesting because just last night I came across a pilot project that had not come up in my initial data dump from the NEA, called what is it called here? Arts Here, which is specifically geared towards communities from underrepresented groups. And so I found the list of awardees from that, which is kind of a separate thing from your traditional NEA grants, and added them in just this morning. And that just boosted things like crazy. So looking just at fiscal year 2025, for an example, half of the visual arts, half of theater, half of dance, half of arts education, uh, of the fiscal 25, half of them of all of those have been cut so far. And then basically a third of musical theater, folk and traditional arts, media arts, opera, design. It's there are it's a bloodbath, to be somewhat dramatic.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, these and part of the challenge with these is that some of them have gotten grants for things that maybe happen later this year. And so those artists are now out.
Mm.
But then you also have the organizations that had things earlier in the year that they put money into it. Let's say if there was a concert or an event in February or March, and then they were intending to be reimbursed by the grant. Now that money's gone. And so now the organizations are now out that money that they thought they had spent all of this money on the front end, thinking that they were going to get it on the back end from the grant. Now the grant's no longer there, and now they're left holding the bag.
I mean, do you know what the NEA is saying? Are they taking back this money for, future use for something else? Or I know you said you can't tell a difference why this group may have gotten their money and this group might have gotten their money removed. But is there any trends in terms of like DEI work? I sort of heard a rumor that was one of the criteria that they were using in terms of taking back things and using this money to support the America 250 initiative or whatever that is.
Well, I know that the letter that went out kind of very disingenuously said it was going to be going towards a number of things, and I think they included HBCUs in that, if I remember correctly, which I think feels like window dressing. They're kind of like, hey, we're not, but yes, I remember reading in one of the articles, I think it was in Austin, Texas, that the reasons why these groups have been getting their grants cut is often because they are out of alignment with the things that the president has said regarding DEI. And one of the articles, I think from Austin, Texas, said the NEA grant application literally has a component that says, how are you going to address DEI with your project? And so it's almost impossible for someone who has gotten an NEA grant, at least up until this point, to not have at least something that if someone's looking for it, they could tag them. I've also heard, because I've been trying to scan through all of these, and some folks are wondering whether or not that this is kind of an attempted blow against the so-called elitist arts things. But there's so many of these organizations that have absolutely nothing to do with anything that anyone could squint at and call it elitist. Many of them have to do with rural organizations or rural communities,
Hmm.
bringing arts to folks who don't normally get them, like prison communities. So I really, like I said, I've been trying to find, looking through all of the descriptions of these organizations or the grant applications, and it's across the board. And as every day we're finding more and more groups that are getting cut. To be honest, I think one could easily imagine it being almost intentionally random,
Hmm.
just for the confusion's sake, like to actually just mess with people,
Right.
with the ultimate goal of weakening whatever is there, because President Trump has announced that he basically wants to get rid of the NEA,
Right.
NEH, all of the various national groups, whether or not they be for sciences or humanities or arts. So I don't know if they really care which groups got cut and which ones didn't.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does this mean for the future of the NEA? What does this mean for the future of organizations who, depended on that money? How do they go about applying for this grant if it still even exists in the future? Do
Right.
you have any advice or anything that you have learned that you can share with the
Sure.
people?
Well, there was a huge outpouring over the last week and it's pretty easy to find if someone wants to do a search for this is what you have to do to at least be able to either appeal the decision or to at least get some of your money by the end of May. So there's that. I don't think they have shut the door on grants going forward, but I think it was back in February that they made some severe changes in terms of what it would be available for.
Mm.
And it was very limiting. It had to do with the 250th anniversary of the country, and things that let's just say it's if it's not a 180 from where it was, it's pretty damn close. But one thing I'll admit that kind of going through all of these various either social media posts or articles is that a lot of these organizations are, at least in the short term, getting support or trying to get support from their local um, areas. There's about 80 visual art groups that got, I want to say it's $800,000. So I think they were able to give $10,000 to 80 different groups. The Andy Warhol Foundation partnered with the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation to be able to put some money towards it. I'm guessing that there will probably be a lot more than that, but obviously that's not sustainable.
Right.
Those funding organizations, and I think it was the Mellon Foundation did something similar for the NEH cuts that were happening. Um, but those funding organizations don't have a lot of extra cash that could easily just take the place of the NEA. Um, and just looking this morning, because I've been trying to keep track of both the number of organizations affected and the amount of funds that have been affected. Now, that doesn't mean that all of this money has been lost. A lot of it has already been spent out, but I've just been kind of doing that. We're north of $40 million in terms of adding up all of the grants,
Mm.
and we're a 26 organizations away from 1,000 groups
Wow.
that were affected. And I'm sure it's more than that, because some of the groups that got grants through Arts Here, which was that pilot project, were then giving money to multiple organizations
Mm.
from there.
Yeah.
So the impact is huge, and I don't know if we've really seen anything like this, at least since maybe the early '90s and the Jesse Helms era
Mm.
of, um, when they were. That's the first time that they really kind of adjusted what the NEA was doing, because back then, let's say in the 80s, you could get an NEA grant for an individual artist, and that really kind of shifted it away because of complaints from conservative politicians back then.
Yeah, do you think that this is enough to shift the landscape of the arts in a way? Or are we all just kind of shocked that this is happening right now? Or is this going to be something that we need to really be paying attention to, because there could be this sort of seismic shift in the arts and how we apply for grants and how we fund the things that we want to do as artists?
Yeah. I'll split that into two questions. I think it definitely is going to have an impact on arts funding, because even, let's say, let's imagine 4 years from now, and another administration comes in and tries to tighten things up and put things back the way they were. The distrust that arts organizations have with the federal government, because they've now seen it could go away, may have an impact on that, which then hopefully can maybe encourage more philanthropy at the private sector to be able to make up the difference. But oftentimes those things can be very localized or very thinly focused, in terms of they want to give a lot of money, but only to this particular thing versus that particular thing. So that can make things. That's one of the beautiful things about the NEA grants, is that oftentimes they had a lot of different categories, and they were really focusing on not just big, huge organizations, but small, local organizations and their impact. In terms of how that works with arts organizations themselves, and to be honest, the creators and the programmers and the folks that are doing the art, to be honest, and I apologize if I sound a little Pollyanna-ish or overly optimistic, but from what I've been kind of sussing out, you get the sense that, if anything, the fact that some folks in government are pushing people away from arts that have to do with demographic identity. I every time I talk with folks, you get the sense that there already is a whipsaw effect. There's going to be more people who want to do that, regardless of whether or not it's funded at the national level or not.
Right.
You get the sense that more people are interested in it, and more people embrace it, even than there were, say, 5 or 10 years ago, which has already been the trend. And the fact that now you have this ham-fisted push to put the genie back in the bottle just seems to be accelerating the interest and acceptance in it.
Yeah.
So, like I said, maybe I might be too optimistic there, but you get the sense that there are less and less people who are pushing back against it, because the people who are pushing back against it at the national level are doing it so badly and so blatantly that it's kind of like, why would you want to side with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I feel like artists are very resilient, and what we tend to do is we react to what is happening around us. And I think you're right. I've been on social media and sort of seen how companies have been losing funding, and how they have been asking, for money to kind of make up for that. So it will be really interesting to see what the philanthropic piece of this turns out to be. I'll be talking to Tim Nelson, who runs INseries, a small chamber opera company up in DC, who had some monies revoked, and I'll be curious to see how his base has sort of chipped in to help out, to kind of fill in for the funds that have been lost. But I think you're right. I hope you're right anyway, because when this first was going down, it did seem like the targets were the companies that were really pushing their DEI initiatives. And, I guess we'll see what happens.
Well, and to be honest, one of the things that we found, because I've been doing some research on orchestral programming through the Institute for the
Hmm.
last few years.
Yeah, we should talk about
Um,
that too, by the way, if you want to
sure.
do a little plug for that.
But one of the things that's interesting is that idea of pushing uh, art. I mean, we use DEI as kind of like a, what that means.
Uh-huh.
But that whole concept, I think it's because over the last 5 years or so, it's been normalized that you actually do more works by composers, whether or not they're composers of color or women composers, non-binary composers, all of these various groups. People treat it, I think before they were thinking of that as like, that's a very special case that you do at a very special time. And now you're just like, no, dude, that's just what normal is anymore. So it's not,
Right.
so it's not even anymore like, oh, this group because of their, no, it's not because they're doing DEI. The new normal is that.
Exactly.
So it's less even DEI. It's literally like that. Now, obviously, one could easily point to a whole bunch of groups that still need a lot of work to do in that area.
100%.
But at the very least, uh, the idea of, I'm just looking at the list of some of the groups here, and obviously you have some groups that we're like, okay, Sphinx got lost funding, and Castle of Our Skins lost funding, and you're
Hmm.
like, well, of course that. But then you're like, Chicago Symphony lost it, and
Right.
I'm thinking of like the Parch Ensemble and uh, you know, uh, Cantus and Conspiriare,
Uh-huh.
and Chicago Opera Theater. I mean, all of these like fairly, run-of-the-mill organizations that are just like bread and butter things. And St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and you're like, they're half the time those folks are already playing very traditional rep, but even then they are now kind of diversifying their repertoire to the point that it's not a special thing anymore. It's just that's what you do in this day and age. And unfortunately, I think that's why so many of them are getting affected by this.
I'll be sure to post a link to the database that Rob has created in the description of the show. And also be sure to check out the work that he's doing with the Institute for Composer Diversity. The website is composerdiversity.com. My next guest is Timothy Nelson, who currently serves as Artistic Director of INseries in Washington, D.C. During his tenure, he has grown the company into the leading voice in American small opera, redefining the art form, the boundaries between repertoires, cultural histories and expressions, and living into the vision that opera theater presented intimately has greater power to impact and ultimately transform audiences and communities. As a director, conductor, and composer, Nelson's musicality is primary in work that is equally committed to community engagement, authentic collaboration, reverence bounded by irreverence, and innovation. Well, thanks for being on the show, Tim. I really appreciate your time. So we're talking a little bit about some of the fallout from the NEA grants, and I saw that INseries was sort of the victim of one of these take backs. So can you tell me a little bit about what you guys have been going through and kind of the process that you're gonna go through to sort of help rebuild those funds?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I heard someone last night. We had our gala last night, and we honored Jane Alexander, who was the chair of the NEA in the early '90s, which is a total coincidence. But of course, that really centered the whole thing on the NEA, and she called it the Friday Night Massacre because everyone sort of got these late night emails.
Right.
Friday, was it only a week ago? Uh, Saying that the project has been cut. Some of us had not done the projects yet. I know some colleagues that had already gotten the money and are unsure whether that means they're going to have it clawed back. No one really understands the full implications of it. In our case, it was for a project that ironically is a piece that was written during the Federal Theater Project in the 1930s, about Italian aggression in Ethiopia, and was banned by the federal government then. So it's never been performed. So this was like a second banning of the piece that we were committed to not let happen. Luckily, our community really stepped up, and we were able to raise the missing dollars, which is great, but it's obviously only a stopgap for what we all assume is coming with probably the total defunding of the NEA next year.
Right. So that's really good. So your community came together and pitched in and kind of filled in the gap for that. That's really great.
Yeah, in a big way. I'll say that the problem, of course, we were fortunate that we got the word out really fast. But by 2 days later, everyone had sent out these notices that they'd lost their funding. And that just becomes too big of a hole, I think, for arts communities of audiences to fill, especially when you're not in a big urban center.
Right. Are you seeing any trends in terms of this? Any colleagues that are sort of having the same issues and maybe programming sort of the same type of materials?
Well, this is the thing. Because all of us were writing NEA grants that were largely fit to what the NEA had said that they wanted to support, which was lifting up communities of color, marginalized communities. A lot of the programs that organizations chose to fund with NEA dollars were either programmatic like us, that were centered in our case Blackness, or were helping inner city kids get access to music, or there were these sorts of programs. So in effect, these cuts are racist, they are classist, they are because the funding history had already been geared towards that sort of work, and now it's very much cutting all that sort of work.
So was the money spent? Because I know some of these are come in the form of reimbursements, and I know that there are companies out there who have already spent the money, and now they're just saying that they're not going to have the money. So I don't know what the case is for y'all, but I was kind of shocked to hear that. I didn't realize that NEA does this in the form of reimbursements. And I do know of some companies that have gotten checks, and I think that they've cashed them. So I'm going to be interested to see if they say you actually have to give it back. I mean, is that even legal?
Does it matter anymore?
Yeah, right, true.
I think we're all, no one's driving the bus at the moment, and no one really knows what any of this means. The normal process for an NEA grant is that about 6 to 8 months before your project, you'll get a letter that says that you've been awarded a grant. But they don't use the word award, they use some other word. And then after you do the project, you can immediately apply to have the actual funds reimbursing you. What they did this year is that about maybe a month ago, we all got letters. I assume we all got letters saying we no longer consider this grant an award. We now consider it an offer, and it's under review by the federal management system. But of course, by then, most of us had spent the money, because in years past, whatever that initial offer was assumed to be watertight. So yeah, in our case, obviously we've already got the contracts. We're in rehearsal. We're all set to go, and I think that's the case with most projects, because they did it at the end of the grant cycle. So because this grant cycle ends June, so almost all those projects had either taken place or would in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. So what does this mean for the future of, the NEA? I don't know how much of a percentage you get from the NEA and stuff like this, but are people going to have to sort of change the models and the way they raise money and how much they rely on these federal funding agencies?
Yeah, there's two answers to that. In dollars and cents, it's not a big deal, because the NEA, I think in the late 70s, they had a budget of about 400 million. And then in the 90s, when they went through all the big cuts with Mapplethorpe and all that, it got cut down to 100 million, which is just as pennies. So I think we get a fairly large grant for an organization our size. We get $20,000. That's less than 2% of our, but it's not a lot of money. And I think W&O, which has a, I don't know, $3-4 million budget, they get 50,000. It's not none of us are going to die because the NEA isn't there. But what we lose is that stamp of communal approval that the art matters, that the federal government understands that art that isn't for profit matters, and it's not a lot of money, but it is a stamp to say this has value. And I think that is a much bigger loss than the actual dollars. The other thing, and this is anecdotal, but just to say one thing Jane Alexander shared last night was when during her tenure, she was sent to go review a grant by a group that was selling books out of their attic in the Pacific Northwest that was Jeff Bezos and Amazon, and he's never acknowledged that the start of that was an NEA grant.
Oh, wow.
But you never know. We don't get to know where this what comes of this money eventually. It's little seeds that are planted. But a lot of big Broadway productions started as little workshops in regional theaters because of NEA dollars. And just because we can't always quantify it doesn't mean that it's not not growing very, very valuable, meaningful fruit.
Yeah, well, as you said, it's not a lot of dollars per se, but to have that, as you say, communal support is really big, particularly in a place like the United States where the arts sort of feel like the bottom of the totem pole, and this is just sort of another thing where the rug has been pulled from under us.
Yeah, and there's this. We live in such a capitalist society, and we can't escape that. That having a place for art that's not for profit, that isn't entertainment, that is something else. It's having something like the NEA that says that has a place. I think is critical. Otherwise, we think, well, if it doesn't make money, why is it? This obviously isn't good because it's not turning a profit.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for your time, and I wish you luck. I know you've got
My pleasure.
Yeah, I know you got some performances coming up, and I'm looking forward to being with you all later on this year.
Yeah, so me too. Very exciting.
All right. Take good care.
Great. Thanks, Damien.
Since the release of his debut album, Black Art, one of the New York Times' top 10 jazz CDs of 1994, Darrell Grant has built an international reputation as a pianist, composer, and educator who channels the power of music to make change. He has performed throughout the U.S., Canada, and Europe in venues ranging from Paris's La Villa Jazz Club to the Havana Jazz Festival. Dedicated to themes of hope, community, and place, Grant's compositions include Step by Step, the Ruby Bridges Suite, honoring the civil rights icon, The Territory, which explores Oregon's landscape and history, and Sanctuaries, a jazz chamber opera exploring gentrification. Since moving to Portland, Oregon, he has been named Portland Jazz Hero by the Jazz Journalists Association, received a Northwest Regional Emmy, an Oregon Arts Commission Fellowship, a MAP Fund Grant, and the Governor's Arts Award. He is a professor of music at Portland State University, where he directs the one-of-a-kind Social Justice and the Arts Degree program. Darrell was personally affected by the takebacks when his residency with the Eugene Symphony lost $50,000, part of which was to fund Grant's residency, which was related to the performance of Wynton Marsalis's Swing Symphony. Well, thanks for being on Artillery, Darrell. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, pleasure.
So you made the New York Times.
Well, not in the way I would have liked, but yes, any publicity is good publicity, they say, and yeah, a lot of people read it.
All right, tell me what's going on. This NEA thing is really sort of got us by the neck.
Man, well, what's going on is, as we all know, the NEA has reneged on its commitment to arts organizations all over the country and taken back money that they promised to them, money that has been spent, money that has been budgeted, and a number of the projects of people that I know, I think 27 projects in Oregon were hit, including projects from All Classical Radio, including projects from, every dance company, art companies, and in particular, the Eugene Symphony, which is presenting this Wynton Marsalis's Swing Symphony. And they found out on May 2nd that $30,000 towards that budget was going to be pulled back. And they also lost another $30,000 for another project that is already done, already performed. And so I was really fortunate in that they had other funding available. And they were able to compensate for that loss, and the performance will go on. But there's this huge hole in their budget now that they have to figure out how to fix. And then other organizations are not so lucky; they've had to cancel their performances. And so it's really it's a really egregious and a really just a real obvious attack on free expression and pisses me off.
So let me get this right. So they have reneged on some funds, and some of that money, as you said, has been spent. Are they expected to give that money back?
Well, so the way that the NEA works, the National Endowment for the Arts works, is those grants are reimbursement. So they commit to your having the money. So some of these grants, I think the cycle that they took money back from or terminated grants for was like maybe even 2023 or 2024.
Okay.
So that was money that they promised in the past 3 years for projects that organizations went out, budgeted, produced, spent, and then when they go to get reimbursed, the NEA says, "Oh no, this no longer meets our priority, so we're not going to give you the money. You can't have it."
Wow.
So that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so then they're like, wow, because people have been paid. Or Portland Playhouse found out on one night before they were opening an August Wilson play. And so they just did an appeal to the community, $50 donations, trying to get 500 people to make up the budget to pay those actors to do that show that was happening the next day.
So what are organizations doing? I know you just mentioned some people are making appeals, and I've seen other organizations on social media sort of reach out to their audience and ask for money. What are people doing?
Yeah, I think it's a triage effort at the moment for the arts folks, because they are just trying to cover the costs and make sure that they can make their payroll. And I mean, some of them are laying people off, some of them are but they're appealing directly to audiences, directly to donors, and so that's one aspect of it. I think so. Yesterday there was a summit organized by All Classical for the 27 arts organizations that lost funding. And it was really coming together in solidarity just to figuring out how we can, build community and a coalition and figure out what steps to take as an organized, what organized steps to take to rectify this. And I think, so that I think that will lead to a variety of actions. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is, how do we like in Hawaii, the legislature just replaced that money. They just voted immediately to take state funds and give it to those organizations to replace the federal funds. That's pretty rare. I think it's possible that we could do that in this state, but what I'm looking at is that there is a bill in the legislature right now in Oregon, Bill HB 3189, that has earmarked $15 million for arts organizations through the Oregon Arts Commission and then other direct contributions to like the 6 large arts organizations. So that's 15.5 million in the next biennium that would like more money for the arts. So what I thought I would like to do is to see if I can galvanize artists to come together and, everybody's trying to put some pressure on that lever to see that the legislature passes that bill. Because that would at least, alleviate some of the suffering and give these organizations something to look forward to. It doesn't necessarily replace this money that they've lost already, but it gives them a possibility of planning for the future. So I actually drafted an open letter, which I am sending around and circulating to artists to sign to send to the legislature. Just again, trying to apply as much unified pressure as we can for them to do this thing that they absolutely can do right now that would, would help these artists and arts organizations and culture workers that in this emergency.
Right. I got your letter and I'm happy to sign it. I'm not a resident of Oregon anymore, but I still do work there. So
but your name is so well known here, and so we count you as an Oregonian. You don't get released from that stuff right away just because you moved to Chicago.
All right, I'll sign it twice then.
Right.
So how does this affected your tenure at at Eugene Symphony? You're artist in residence there, is that correct?
Yeah, I am. And so it hasn't affected it yet. I mean, I was just down there last week, last Monday, doing a day of residency activities, middle school and community college, and gave a lecture, a talk. So yeah, because they have this additional funding, our project is going to continue. Now, what happens after that, and how they sort of take care of next season or the rest of the season, that remains to be seen. But as I say, we're just really fortunate that that this project can go on. But it's just, part of it is just like, wait, so this dude, this one president, because it doesn't say the NEA's priorities have changed. It says the president's priorities. And
Right.
so, like, okay, so there's this 60-minute epic piece for symphony orchestra and big band describing the story of America
Yeah.
through the language of America's indigenous art form. And that's like not American, apparently. Like I just don't like it's like that music is like it's got Sousa in it, it's got like Glenn Miller in it, it's got, like it's got all of America in it. And it's like, okay, if that's not America, then like what it's really ludicrous. And it just, so many things I
Well,
don't understand.
I think we both know what they're saying. I mean, who does it seem like they're targeting the most?
Well,
I just talked to Rob Deemer,
uh-huh.
and he had sort of he's done all this work. Do you know Rob?
I know his name. I can't remember why I placed
Okay.
him. Yeah.
Well, he's done all this work with sort of putting the numbers in a chart and like all of the organizations that have lost money.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And he says it's sort of a wide swath of organizations, and a lot of the
Well,
organizations have kind of changed the way that they are programming. And it is interesting that some of those who are sort of the more traditional, quote unquote, types of presenters are losing funding now. So, are you seeing, as you're talking to more people, are you seeing a particular sect of artists that is being targeted?
it's hard to say. I don't, in talking to people, we were talking about that yesterday. I don't actually think it's strategic. Like, I feel like maybe they just went through the grant with AI searching for certain words. And when they saw those words, they canceled the grant. They didn't like, there was a there was a project that didn't get canceled. That's a project about the Lewis and Clark expedition from the point of view of Sacagawea, directed by an indigenous director.
Yeah, I know
And
this piece.
that didn't lose funding. So I'm like, well, so what? What? I don't know. So I just think maybe it said Lewis and Clark, and they're like, that's good. I'll go.
Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
think I know the pieces you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Portland, I guess a couple months ago, we were talking about this, and they got the check and cashed it
Yeah.
like immediately. So that was pretty smart. So I don't know what do we do? What should we do? We can write to our
Yeah.
legislature and all this, and
Yeah. Well,
use our mouthpiece and go on the radio and speak on podcasts and things like this. But what
all
happens if the NEA goes bye bye?
well, I mean, I don't know. So at this event yesterday, this summit, Representative Suzanne Bonamici came and spoke and gave a press conference, and somebody asked her that question. She's like, "I've been in Congress since 2012, and I've seen at least two attempts during that time to eliminate the NEA. They both failed because because basically the arts are like every state, no matter of their politics, is impacted by this, and nobody really wants to see that. Now, whether her faith is in this particular moment is going to be confirmed, and they will not figure out a way to succeed, I don't know. But one of the things that came out yesterday in the talk was Adam Davis, who runs the NEH. So they were about a month ahead of us in getting their funds chopped. So they've had a little bit more time to organize and strategize. And so he said, look, we have decided that we are just working on 4 points. We're working on fundraising, we're working on litigation, we're working on building awareness, and we're working on advocacy. And I was like, okay, that sounds like a good picture. So I guess what we're doing right now, we're in the awareness building phase, right? I mean, we're just sort of but we're coming together to figure out what advocacy looks like. And I think that is, like you say, pressure on the legislature and sort of looking at laws and that can be changed. And I'm assuming that it will also, that the litigation lever will start to be pushed soon. I mean, it's already, state humanities organizations have, they've got a pro bono firm that is representing them. They've got legislation in front of pursuing litigation right now for these things where they feel like the laws have been broken. And we've seen that a little bit. It's like they took whatever somebody was telling me yesterday about how they took all this data away from the National Science Foundation, and it was weather data that the farmers absolutely needed to figure out where to plant their crops. So they had to give that money back. Doge took the money, and they're like, no, we actually can't grow food without this money. So they gave the money back. So I would assume that those things are possible. But I guess what I would say is that we have to figure out, what does a new system look like? Somebody was saying, well, if you can just go to your donors and raise this money, in 10 days to save a production, then why do you need the federal money anyway? Shouldn't you just do that? And it's like,
yeah,
I mean, it's
true.
like,
and people are still trying to get out of the pandemic, and giving money like they used to, and there are lots of things.
It's also a public good, right? It's like, because the thing is, like, it's so much more than just this one play, right? It's this play that puts money on these actors' plates, which allows them to go in schools and teach theater in schools, which then creates a better education for all the children. It's like they become members of the community and they do other projects. And so if we acknowledge that art is a public good, then it can't just be paid for by the rich people, because we know that's not sustainable. And it can't be paid for just the people who go. It's like, they'll be like, if I don't own a car, I'm not paying for any traffic. I'm not paying for any streets. I'm paying for, it's like,
right.
It's like, well, I still got to get my stuff. Like, even if I don't drive, people use those roads to get me my stuff. So the art is the same way,
Do you think we should be worried? Because we are coming out of the pandemic. People are trying to figure out how they're going to pay for things anyway, particularly in Portland. I know the art scene in Portland right now is struggling. I still work at Portland Opera. I hear stories all the time about, theaters closing down, or the threat of closing down. And now we have this extra thing on top of all of that stuff. Like, how do we survive?
I don't have the answer. I mean, should we be worried? It doesn't matter. We are worried. I mean, it's like, it's worrisome. It's like, it's an all out assault with the purpose of sort of, I think, eliminating our democracy. That's the only thing I can see that is the actual plan, because it just keeps escalating. And I think, so what, Prentice Oniami, Prentice? He's a cool dude. He's a voiceover actor, and an actually ridiculously prominent voiceover actor, African American, half Nigerian. Anyway, he came to speak to our Artist as Citizen class. And he does a lot of consulting. He works with ISCC, and he works with Esperanza's, Prismet, and a bunch of different folks, just as a consultant and, strategist. And somebody asked, one of our students asked him that question. It's like, well, what do we do in the face of this? And he's like, you notice how everybody around you is sick? Notice how, like, everybody's, like, suffering from, like, illnesses and challenges and, physical challenges and stuff like that. He says, in his mind, that's a direct expression of the external of what's happening in the world. Like, this pain and suffering in the world, we're taking it on in our bodies. And so he's like, so what you can do is heal yourself. Like, look to what do you need to heal? You need rest, you need sleep, you need community, you need restorative activities, you need purpose. So he says, like, heal yourself. And as you walk out into the world healed, you're going to see the world with new eyes. You're going to see the person across the street in a different way than you see them through this lens of all this, all these challenges, whatever, all this dis-ease that you're feeling, right? And with those open eyes, you might see a need that can be met, and you're going to go meet that need because you have the inner to do it. So it's like, we don't have to worry quite so much, according to this way of thinking, about what's out there, because the solutions to what's out there are what are being created as we figure out how to heal ourselves. And that kind of makes a lot of sense to me, because I feel like we're not trying to repair. The system was broken to begin with.
Right.
We're not trying to repair it. We're trying to come up with something new. We're trying to make something anew. And so the way he presented this is like, this is a crucible that we are in that is shaping us into the people who can make something new. And that's a super optimistic view. But I think I prefer that to the, like, the sky is falling, run for cover. I'm like,
absolutely.
Okay, assuming that this is the fire. So how are we going to come out of the fire stronger? And what imagination are we going to wield? Because, this stuff wasn't here before, and we made it the first time.
That's true.
So why not make it better?
I was going to say artists are resilient. and
Yeah,
we
and
will figure out a
imaginative.
way.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. If anybody can figure it out, I mean, that's what I think about. I mean, think about it. How long did it take for somebody to write an opera about loving like you did? Right? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure there were people alive now who like thought that would never happen.
Yeah.
And it has. So the world has something new in it that, that you originated and, sort of threw out there and allowed people to bring into being. And it's a different world than it was before that. So who knows? But, we just keep doing that. We just keep throwing those sparks out there and
Yeah.
letting people light them up. And we'll
Keep-
see. Somebody else said yesterday in the meeting, they said that people need to flourish, but they also need to survive. And so
Right.
the argument generally goes is like, well, the arts are not important because, we have to deal with people's survival needs. And she said, the thing about it is that the arts bring this flourishing to people when all they have is the resource to survive. Like the arts allow them to have this necessary flourishing when they don't even have the energy to do anything more than survive.
Absolutely.
But that's why we have to be here. Like, that's why we have to, because otherwise it's just survival, and that's not life sustaining.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's always great talking to you. I haven't talked to you in such a long time.
I know, it's been a while since you defected. You defected to the Blacknificence.
Listen, I want to close out the episode with this clip of Sanctuaries that you sent.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Remind us what Sanctuaries was. I'm not going to play the part where I was singing. I'm just going to get to Onry.
Okay, I'm trying to remember. I don't remember what I did that compilation like a couple of years ago, so I don't remember who's on it. But Onry's doing his thing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sanctuaries is a jazz-inspired chamber opera that I wrote in, between 2017 and 2021.
The most stressful part of my life was you writing that opera.
Yes, indeed. Well, I actually liked the first part of it where I was sitting in the room writing it. It was the part about mounting it that was stressful to me. The writing and the pencil stuff, that was cool.
Yeah.
But, anyway, so it premiered in 2021, and it's an opera that sort of deals with gentrification of a historic Black neighborhood in Portland, the Albina neighborhood, and it kind of looks to issues of gentrification and people moving out, the neighborhood changing, and sort of looking at very specific historic instances of how that played out, and what we as Black people deserve and need to have in terms of a home and a sanctuary. And it was fantastic. It was an amazing experience for me to be able to produce that along with Third Angle New Music, and we premiered it at, it was a site-specific opera, and it premiered at the site of the displacement, like in the Black community, outdoors at the Memorial Coliseum, which was the site of the displacement of the central Black community. So it felt really poetic to have this piece play there, and Damien Geter was in it. It was awesome.
You let me be in it, so that was nice.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful piece. It's in every way. There's really nothing out there like it right now, and I wish. Do you want to have it remounted, or?
I would love to. I think when I'm out this summer, sort of doing my writing thing, I plan to bring it with me. I think I might want to revise a little bit the instrumentation a little bit, just maybe flesh it out a little bit more. But I was really happy with it. I mean, there's some of I feel like the best, most beautiful moments of music that I've written are in that piece. And so I would love to see it done again. But you know how it is to put on an opera. Takes some time.
I know. It's just like anything else. You just got to find the right person to say yes.
Yes, exactly.
And that person is out there somewhere.
Yeah. Yep. If it's meant to be, again, it's there. It's waiting for somebody to do. So.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for being on Artillery.
Hey, pleasure. Great to see you as always.
Appreciate you.
Congrats on all of your success.
Can you hear it? Can you hear it? ground, earth under my feet, earth on my skin, darkness in me, darkness, I'm singing to you. I live in a body without enough dark in it. So I went down into the ground to dig a hole to be found. And when it's me that I am lost, I'll dig myself on out. Darkness in the ground, earth under my feet, earth over my skin, darkness in me, darkness, I'm singing to you. I live in a body without enough dark in it. I'll dig out me, hold of the holes I have to see what might be found from the time I breathe beneath. I want my blood to pour out and glow away for my soul out of the ground, to hang down my skin and let the wind make music through its holes.
A couple of anti-Trump statues have popped up on the National Mall in D.C. on top of two very different pedestals, but both with gold writing. The first was erected to protest the June 14th military parade, with its bold title, Dictator Approved, and 4 quotes from leaders of oppressive regimes, all of whom seem to have admiration for Trump. President Trump is a very bright and talented man, Vladimir Putin. That's his quote. The most respected and feared person is Donald Trump, Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban. There's also one by the former president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro. We do have a great deal of shared values. I admire President Trump. And lastly, Kim Jong-un, Your Excellency, a special relationship, and the extraordinary courage of President Trump, quoted in phrases. And on top of that pedestal, a giant gold thumb crushing the head of Lady Liberty. The second sculpture in the last few weeks to appear in the same place sits atop a pedestal that is fixed with a plaque which reads, "In the United States, you have the freedom to display your so-called art, no matter how ugly it is." This is a quote by Trump. The sculpture is of a golden TV projecting images of Trump dancing with the child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Both statues were properly permitted and legally displayed by anonymous artists. We'll have to keep watching this spot, as it was also the home of the memorial, and I put that in quotes, that protested the January 6th riot. A memorial that came in the form of a bronze poop emoji. Hey y'all, thanks for hanging in there. I know this was a long one. And stay tuned for next month's episode of Artillery, the podcast that intersects art and politics.